Skimmed it.
It is 3 o'clock. I'm calling the October 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Lee Peoples.
Here.
Anthony Blatt.
Here.
Jorge Charnico.
Here.
Matt Guillory.
Here.
Tyler Holmes.
Here.
Sarah Miller. Toon Nguyen. Marcus Uday.
Here.
James Barnum. You have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from the September 25th, 2019 meeting. Does anyone have any corrections? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
A motion to approve.
Motion by Blatt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Holmes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We have no cases withdrawn. We have no continuance requests. I do want to state that there are a couple of conflicts of interest at this meeting. I will be recusing on the consent docket, item 5, and also on item 6A. And Commissioner Blatt has a conflict on 7A, I believe. Okay. And we now have enough to support a quorum without my attendance. It'll make the conflicts easier, so I will turn the meeting over to the co-chair.
Third item on our agenda is cases withdrawn. There are none. Fourth item is continuance requests, and there are no items. Item number 5 is the consent docket. And is there anybody that would like to comment on the consent docket, or is there any discussion for the consent docket? Would anybody from the audience like to speak on the consent docket? Okay, we're going to pull item C for an individual discussion. Do we have any discussion on items A or B? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent docket, items A and B.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item C is UDCA 19-00030 on Northwest 6th Street. Is the applicant present? Thank you. Michael, do you want to say anything about this item?
Yeah, this is a case that was approved originally back in, I think, 2015. And they received an extension on that approval in 2017. However, that extension expired earlier this year. The approval was let to lapse. And accordingly, since the project is not finished, they can't finish the project until they have a valid CA in place. So they're back before the commission today to receive approval, reapproval on their project. And just so you know, the 7 units in the front have been finished, the 7 units in the rear have not been finished, but this approval and the plans that you see in your packet are identical to what was approved originally in 2015, and including a revision that was done subsequently to that. So essentially you're looking at the same project that's been approved on this site for a couple of years, and that's why it's on the consent document.
We don't have any questions for staff.
I'm going to have to recuse myself on this one as well. Yep.
Okay. Do you have a recusal from Holmes?
Okay. Hi, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I have been at this podium in front of this committee on this project more than any other project that I've ever appeared before this committee on. This project has probably been more thoroughly vetted and dissected and argued at multiple levels of appeal, both to the Board of Adjustment on the approval of this body, in which the Board of Adjustment affirmed. We even found our way all the way up to the courthouse on this project at one point, all of the which was affirmed each and every time. So, as staff said, this is simply an error occurred with my client's scheduling, and they didn't properly dock it when they needed to administratively extend their CA. It would have been eligible for such administrative extension. I did talk to Ms. Cronister today, and although it is not a rubber stamp, I asked her the question, was there anything about what we're asking to do now that would have given you pause or any concern to administratively extend the CA, and the answer was no. And so, as staff points out in the staff report, the units would be completed in accordance with the original approval, including the revisions that were approved in January 2017. So we're simply asking for the CA in an identical fashion to which has previously been approved both by this body, the Board of Adjustment, and ultimately the district court. So we'd be happy, we being me, would be happy to answer any questions you might have on this and would ask for your approval.
Do we have any questions for the owner's rep? Anybody who would like to speak to this from the audience?
Brian Fitzsimmons, 719 North Francis, and for clarity, I'm not here to protest this, but I do think that there needs to be a couple of items that perhaps it's approved on contingency. Yes, it's been beaten like a dead horse, and I'm not here to argue any of that stuff, but the couple of things that are safety concerns that I think have been overlooked is, one, a 24-foot back-out aisle for the houses that are along the alley. And I'm 99.9% sure that 3 of the houses do not have 24 feet of clearance behind them or paving. I believe that's a requirement of zoning. And so there might need to be a modification to satisfy that, or a variance, or whatever the commission wants to do with that. And then similarly, the new drawings presented, they have built part of the houses. They have built the foundation walls for these back rows, and for clarity, they show it as 3 feet tall retaining walls, and it's clearly at least 5 feet. So there will be some revision at some point, adding a guardrail or something to that. And then also clarity, only 4 of the 7 front row are actually complete, so you might need to continue those as well. So that's it.
Would you like to address these items?
Sure. So I think most of these items are building code issues that will be flushed out at permit. As it relates to the width, so in addition to the UDC and Board of Adjustment, we also platted all of these lots. And so we went through Planning Commission, and it is a recorded plat that deals with the width and the drive and all of those issues. So I believe all of those issues are resolved, but certainly anything related to building code will have to be flushed out at that point.
Do we have any comments from the commission? I agree that with respect to items that are dimensionally need to be adjusted, I think that we could be a contingent part of whatever the motion is on this item so that it's recorded that it needs to be in alignment with your plat, be in alignment with whatever code requires for these items.
Fair enough.
Can I get a motion?
I'm sorry, one question. What was the issue? There's 3 of the, were you saying some of the front units are not finished?
3 of the 7 front units do not have a CO.
There's no, 3 of the 7 don't have COs.
They're physically
Yes.
completed
Correct.
from the exterior.
From the exterior, they're done.
Okay, well, I just wanted to point out, if this item was noticed just for the back item, so we can't consider any additional action on the front set of buildings. If it becomes an issue, we will bring it back. Does that make sense?
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes,
I'll
please.
put forward a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C of the staff report.
I have a motion from Charnico.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is cases for individual consideration, and item A is UDCA 19-00024 at 820 Northwest 7th Street. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Okay.
This case is for the approval of a new two-story residence on a vacant lot on the south side of 7th Street between North Francis and North Chartel in the Cottage District. We've reviewed the proposed plans that are in your packet and found them to be mostly in compliance with all the applicable development regulations and design guidelines, with the exception of one item, which we've called out in your staff report, and that is with regard to the use of composite cedar material as an accent material on a couple places on the exterior of the structure, most notably at the area above the front door, and also a couple other areas in various locations on the elevations. We've reviewed the specs and warranties on the material and found it to be compatible with other materials that are allowed by the code for this district, and therefore we're recommending approval of this project to the Commission. Prepared to respond to any questions the Commission may have.
Do we have any questions for staff? Is the applicant present?
Sorry, Adam Hawes. Adam Hawes, H-A-W-S, I'm the builder. Like Michael said, it follows into the compliance of other things we've done in the neighborhood, other buildings. It's similar in structure, similar in finish, just a different house. So we're here for your approval as well.
Do we have any questions of the applicant?
I've got a question for Michael, maybe the city. There's quite a bit of TPO that's visible on one of the elevations, and I don't recall TPO being visible anywhere in the area. So you can see it right up there, the white band, this TPO roofing. Oh, it's
One back.
It's
Yeah,
right
right.
there. So above those two horizontal windows, it's all TPO. Is that approved?
The code doesn't really specify much in regard to roof materials as much as it is specific about the siding materials. I'm not aware of any specific requirements on that.
Right. I agree with Michael. If you believe it is, well, there are the provisions that the committee can approve other materials. If the committee believes it's too visible, they could propose some remedy to that.
Okay, so
I would also comment, though, that this image is in true elevation, which you wouldn't always be able to see.
Yes, very correct on your part. It's pretty high up there, so from a street level, the visibility of that's going to be.
So I was concerned about the neighbor. I mean, some of the adjacent structures go up fairly high. I mean, I can appreciate that there's some depth to this that's not being conveyed here, but I still have concerns about TPO being visible. I know that on projects that I'm working on, I typically want to hide that from view, because even though it's a nice, clean band there, there'll be quite a bit of seaming and inevitably dirt that collects in that. So
absolutely, and
I would say, unless I'm proven otherwise, I still have concerns with that band of TPO being visible.
okay. I mean, to your point, if it was going to be in a spot where we feel like it would be visible, and be a piece where even neighbors would have to look at it, it would be something that we would take into consideration. Because of the elevation and because of the height of the structure, I don't think really we're in a position where that ends up being visible from, very few vantage points. So not on the front, certainly not on the front of the house or anything like that.
So what we're looking at there is actually the surface of the TPO on the sloped portion of the roof.
Correct.
Pitched at a level that you might be able to
slope.
see it in.
Correct.
The 212 slope?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just for drainage, it's almost a flat roof, just provides a little bit of slope. And because on the orthographic view on the plans, of course, it shows no buildings, no hill, no structure, it's giving you more of a view than you would generally get.
Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hello. I'm Randy Floyd, and I live next door to this proposed property. Can you hear me? Good. I have reviewed the drawings, and I have quite a few questions about them, so I hope we can go over those. And I did draw kind of some of the problems. Can I pass these out? I have a few pages of drawings. Okay, thank you. Do you want me to start? Number one? Okay, so the first thing, I think, besides my list of questions is you got what I guess is their site plan. And it's really an aerial photo, and it says estimated property line, approximate distances given. And I'm thinking this is what they're using to locate the front building line. And I think it ought to be more certain what the front building line is than just something approximate distances given.
Do you guys mind if I answer the questions as they come so we don't get anything lost in translation? Or do you want them all at once?
Would you like to step up to the podium here? Sure.
The approximate distances are on properties that, of course, I couldn't send my survey over and, survey the entire, everybody else's property. So our building location was using a survey company, pinning the location, and using that as our dimensional guidelines. So our frontage is absolute. So it's 12 feet from the property stake like it should be.
But you're saying estimated property lines, so you don't really know
The other ones.
where it
So
is.
I couldn't tell you, like the house on the very corner, the exact distance between their house and the property line, because like in the past, what our relationship is when we're building houses by the cottage district's guidelines is to be in line with your guys, with the neighboring properties and no more in front of any of those properties. So we did a pin survey on our property. We lined it up with both neighbors, and we came that they were 12 feet from the property line, so our structure is going to be set 12 feet from the property line as well.
Before you go forward, only just as a formality, and in order to keep this kind of going in a straight direction, if you would both respond directly to the board and to the commission, and that
Yes,
way.
of course.
And that way, we'll be able to
Absolutely.
record it, and in the event that there is not a response available for something, it can just be stopped at that point and move on to the next
No
one.
problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Shall I go on then?
Yes, please.
Okay. I guess my thought was that if it's not pinned down and he puts the building somewhere that isn't appropriate, we've got no recourse because he's got an approved drawing that says that this stuff is approximate. But at any rate, I'm going to move on. The next item is that the drawings that you see are really kind of a hybrid. This site has 12 to 13 foot of slope from the north to the south, but many of these drawings act like the site is completely level. I have included, I actually used to own this lot, and I had a survey done on it, and I've marked the contour lines on the first floor plan, and you can see there's 13 feet of fall here. So it's a tricky design problem, and there's houses built on both sides. But I would just call your attention to some things on this east elevation. You can see where he has a proposed 8-foot wall. It's in the gray area in the foreground, on top of this green base, which is flat. But in reality, this is sloping. And you can see on the drawing I gave you the actual slope of the site, and that would cause this 8-foot wall, it's 8 foot at the north, it would be 14 to 16 feet at the south end of the wall. So this wall is 4.5 feet from my house in some places. And so I'm a little worried about the footing, for one thing. I mean, the first floor plan shows a very narrow spread footing for this wall, which I'm sure, would not be adequate. So how big is the footing? How deep are they going to be digging next to my house? I have no idea. And I think that these drawings need to reflect more reality. There's also, back to this first floor plan. Let's see, the first floor plan, it shows some of these issues. The 8-foot wall, that's on there. And then if you go south of where the wall is, there's a big grade change there right now there's a slope, but his drawings show that as though it were at the alley elevation. So he's showing no retaining wall that would retain the dirt on our side if he, in fact, flattens that out. And then on the Peoples Rolls property on the east side, you'll see there's no accommodation shown. There's a step footing off the alley that provides an area for parking, and it also kind of goes into the garage, which the north wall of the garage is a retaining wall. And he's provided, he's just removed all the dirt, and this thing is just going to wash out. So I don't know. It's like...
All right, well, let me address that, no problem.
Okay,
We do plan on flattening out the lot. It is sloped about 12 feet, right, from front to back, of course. It's just been a hill for the last decade or more, right? There is a proposed retaining wall. It's listed in the plans right there. That driveway is below grade. That whole basement garage is below grade, right? So in itself, by code, by footing inspections, this is more building code stuff, right, that Randy's commenting on, but it is by code, obviously, it's got to support the dirt that's against it. We can't just, put it up on somebody else's property. So any spread footings that we've had, and we've done properties in this neighborhood on zero property lines, which we've done engineered footings in which they cantilever out and anchor a space that, otherwise we couldn't go onto the other property and build something, right? So that's all just relative basic engineering that we do in any project, right? And we have to have all that inspected. That's more of the city stuff. We are roughly 5 feet away on the west, and we're somewhere around 10 or so feet on the east away. As we carve out dirt and build up and do our due diligence on our site, of course, we're going to make sure that we're supporting, making sure we don't have cave-ins, and that kind of just falls under the liability of building, right? I can't dig a hole to put a house without moving dirt, and liability-wise, of course, I have to make sure that we're not causing damage to any other property. That ends up being pretty standard in the scope of working in the city, right? As far as the grade goes, that's why the garage is the height of garage, because if you have a 10-foot garage and you have your 18-inch cord beam and then your rooftop and all that stuff, that gets you to roughly 12 feet, which compensates for the grade difference from front to back. So that's why there's a basement. Sorry. Okay. The fence, when we show our elevations, we show the elevations on our property. Our property is going to be flat, and it's going to have an 8-foot fence. If we have some grade issue, we can't getting building approved and getting inspectors out there, we can't just float a wall over a hill so there's going to be washout. So obviously we will go down far enough to mitigate any kind of washout or any kind of issue that would happen, because that's just pretty standard. But again, these items kind of more fall onto just pretty typical building and building code more than they fall into whether or not the project is in compliance for the Urban Design Commission, because those are things that I can't get a certificate of occupancy or approved building inspection or approved footing inspection or anything without doing properly, right? That's just building the house. So.
Did I hear you say that you're going to have engineered documents created for the foundations for this property?
That's just code. We have to on every single property. There's not a property that's been approved that you don't have to submit engineering with your permits.
And so you'll submit those as part of the building permit?
Yep.
So they would be available for anybody?
Of course, yeah, public record. Yep, okay. Absolutely. All our plans, all our stamps, these sets of plans are, of course, for the Urban Design Committee. They represent and show items that I wouldn't necessarily show to, that I don't need to justify nor show to the building department. So the building department will get the information they need, which will be the post-tension engineering, the footing engineering, and we even use a third-party inspector for the post-tension and all our foundations because we have to.
You'll want to see these?
I want to see these, absolutely. I mean, the thing about it is, once he's under construction, I got no say. He just goes and does whatever. And so...
Sorry to interrupt, that's not necessarily true because I have to follow the building code. So I apologize, sorry.
Aesthetically and safely, and, we have drainage to consider on the side. All of a sudden, we're going to have a 4.5-foot alley between our house and this 14 or 16-foot tall wall. So we've got...
But that's just building code. That's just knowing that our city protects you and protects Randy and protects me for doing our due diligence, our proper, I mean, that's like saying I'm not sure he knows how to build the house and it might fall down, right? Like, I don't know where to go with that.
Well, I would think you could draw the drawings to depict the actual condition. That is the least thing I'm asking.
We have more items that are on your list.
I do.
We have the opportunity for you to see each one of these items.
Sure.
But it is not without precedent that this commission has asked that the documents that are proposed and presented more accurately represent the three-dimensional qualities that are going to exist on the site when it's complete. So let's go ahead and go through the items that are on
Okay.
Floyd's.
Just one comment on that, just so I don't forget. That would be kind of a more non-typical circumstance for just to go through for the Urban Design Committee, which would also in turn require, before getting approval on something, encompassing a gross amount of extra cost and time to show footing drawings, which is not part of the, this is 3D representation. It provides every elevation how it's going to be. And I've shown that in this neighborhood multiple times on which we've built. They look just like we built. So I would want clarification on that because.
I don't think we're talking about footing drawings
Okay.
or engineered drawings. I think we're only talking about the visual, three-dimensional representation of what would be complete.
Well, and that's what you got. That is.
Let's go to the end,
Okay,
and then we'll
sure.
have some more time
Okay,
to comment on that.
okay. One other item about the proximity and creating spaces that are going to be very hard to drain is the house is within 2 feet of the east neighbor, 2 or 2.5 feet. And that's the wall, not the footings. And not the whole west wall, but some portions of it. So I hope that he's considering drainage off his roofs and, so that we don't have to deal with that problem.
Post-tension requires us to do proper drainage for our warranty, and we also put in French drains for every single house. The urban design, or UD1, and the cottage district also allow you to build on 0 property lines, so whether or not it's 2 feet, 6 inches, 4 inches, you know what I mean? Like, we have to, again, that just goes back onto building properly, and yes, we use French drains on everything we do and do proper drainage because post-tension slabs require it.
Okay, my next question is, there is a note about the 8-foot masonry fence with matching gray stucco, which is going to be taller than that. What exactly is that material, and will it be on the entire side that faces me? What is masonry fence with matching gray stucco?
A typical masonry fence is MCU or block covered in a fiber mesh and then covered in stucco. We protect it from expansion and contraction so you don't get cracking, settling. We do engineered footings. We do it properly. And yes, it will be a gray stucco wall.
So it'll be CMU with mesh and stucco. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
That's, within reason, absolutely.
Okay. Also, I can't tell from the drawing what type of paving is indicated on the east side of the garage and what is on the south side of the garage. They seem to be a little different.
Oh, it's just a scale issue with the program, but no, it's just concrete driveway. That's all it is. Just like it's listed, concrete driveway.
Okay. Okay. I believe this is a 4-story building. As far as I can see, the code calls a basement a story, and anything with a floor and a roof is a story. So I see this as a 4-story building. So in your experience, does an architect need to design that or a structural engineer? Do y'all know?
We don't, for design review, we don't require signed and sealed drawings.
Yeah,
The
okay, so that'd be
building
for the
permit
building department.
Again,
Okay.
that's another thing for the building department. Basements are considered a sub-level, not a story. So, for instance, the house next door, Randy's house, has a basement. It is not considered a 3-story house, right? This one's considered anything below grade, i.e. street level, would be considered a basement.
Right, and that's why in zoning review, we reviewed it as a 3-story house, because the stories in terms of zoning is measured from the street level grade.
And
From
even
street level, but, okay, but it's really still 4 stories from the alley.
no, because the alley doesn't count as an elevation point. Sorry.
Yeah. From the zoning definition of a story, it's measured from street level.
That's going to be for the building department, too. They're going to be the authority having jurisdiction on
Okay.
that question.
Well, no, it is, because we do have a story maximum.
Three-story
We have a
maximum.
minimum and a maximum.
Correct.
So it is for us to evaluate, but the interpretation that I'm describing is the permit desk's definition.
And even the upstairs deck top is technically, from building code standards, is not considered a third story because it is a rooftop access. The only interior closed space is the stairwell, which does not constitute as a story. It can be a covered porch, but it is not a story. So it is a two-story home with a rooftop access and a basement.
Okay, I think that's all I have. But I just want to say, I just want to have a comfort level that we're all on the same page and that we know what's going to be built, before it gets approved. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And I'll just put one last note, I apologize. Obviously I have a licensed contractor with the city. I have to provide them my insurances. All my subcontractors have to provide me their insurances. We get everything inspected. We can't get a certificate of occupancy without so anything, footing, structure, basement, elevation, or, elevation changes or anything like that, of course, gets fully inspected, and that's all vetted by the building department.
Other questions from the audience?
I have a question. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you were saying. Excuse me. So you're building the basement garage, which will be roughly 12 feet, which will bring the top of that garage in line with the front of the lot, and then you're going to fill in?
Because there was an old house that was demoed on this lot a number of years back, we have to make sure that what we're building on is structural, that we can build on it. So, and because we're building a flat story and we're not doing drop downs or, and anything like that, just like any typical construction, we will level the ground off. But because we don't want the house below the curb, we will level the ground off by building up those portions. Whether it be, in some areas, it might only be 1.5 feet, some areas it may be 3 feet. Because this house doesn't extend the whole way, to your point, when we cut in the 28-foot, when we cut into the lot 28 feet for the driveway, and then we cut in for the basement, right, we are not nearly at the grade that we're talking about for the entire, from front to back of the property. We are at the midpoint at best. So we may only be at 4 feet of grade at that exact point, right? So, but as we fill in and as we do that, we compact, we do what we have to do to make sure that we're building a solid structure. But on top of that, we end up having a great anchor point because we have a basement sitting right there. So,
Do we have any other questions from the audience or comments?
One comment before the next commenter. I just also want to assure the commission that if through plan check there are changes or modifications necessary to be made to the plans, the applicant would have to come back through us to have a revision to the approval. And if the commission so desires, we can bring those changes back to you. It would probably be administrative level of change unless the commission wants to see it back.
Good afternoon.
I'm Michael Smith. I live at 814 Northwest 7th, which is the house immediately to the east of the project site. I met with Mr. Hawes this morning, and we walked the property, and I had put some stakes to show various points where this wall, proposed wall is, and we talked about the height of the wall, how it was going to be built, and certainly it will be, I don't think the city would allow it to be built without proper footings, but it would be nice for those of us that are living next to a 14-foot tall wall to know. We would like to review those drawings. And also, 14-foot wall is a rather ominous presence in your backyard. And Mr. Hawes and I talked about the possibility of mitigating the height of the wall in some way, and he also agreed to setting the return of the wall at the north end of the wall, moving it, I believe, 6 feet to the south, so that it would not extend in front of our house. And he thought that would not be a problem. I don't want to misquote Mr. Hawes, but since there are several issues about the wall, we discussed the possibility of separating the approval of the wall and making that an administrative process, so that it would not slow down his approval process. Also, another thing that just occurred to me, and it may show this on the drawings, but I don't recall seeing that, and I believe there's a requirement that the finished floor height be 18 inches above grade. Is that right?
They got rid of it. They got rid of it. They don't do that anymore.
It got changed last year.
Okay, and the floor height, is it shown on the drawings, what the floor height will be above grade?
At grade. It's right there if you go to the front elevation, north elevation. One more. There. So, it's just standard. It's at grade, which is typical for a one-story. Obviously, for the actual pour and for the slab, there's, we grade it out accordingly, and again, make sure for drainage again. As far as the fence goes, to the point was that if there were certain contentions on the fence, of course, for the Urban Design Commission, you guys are making sure that I'm conforming, like the neighborhood, and its approved product, and so on and so forth for the fence material. If it got approved, what I would be willing to do without no question in my mind is that if we had to make a change, like Michael had said, we could send it back administratively, like, for instance, moving the gate 6 feet, right? That's not, if that's a huge deal, it falls under the category, I believe, and don't quote me on it, but that 20% rule.
Sure, we could administratively approve that. You could just, they could also condition.
Correct, and there's going to be, the fence is obviously a relatively long time coming. That's not something we're putting up right away. We're not bad neighbors, so if the homeowner and everybody wants to get together and administratively move something 3 or 4 feet, that would fall under Michael's category rather than having come back to the commission and spend a whole lot of time on a fence. So, which I have zero problem doing and have no problem having the conversation. I've met with all the neighbors, including the people, everybody to the east and everything like that, and expressed that it is construction, it is messy. To Randy's point about making sure what's being built beside you is going to stay up there and last a long time, all of this is public record. Once we pull the permits, which we can't start anything until we pull the permits, all of that is public record. If she wants to verify that there's an engineer stamp, there's an architect stamp, whatever the city requires us to do, she can make sure. I mean, she can go through all the paperwork. I have to, so.
Okay, so I didn't hear from the commission that there's no longer a requirement for a floor height above grade. Is that correct?
I don't believe there's.
Correct. There used to be, the requirement used to be 24 inches, and that provision was eliminated in the last code update.
Okay. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I still say it's wrong to let him start building when the drawings do not reflect the accuracy. of what's going to be built. I mean, that's what we have to go on. That's all we have to go on. And even if you approve it and we do the fence later, well, what about all these retaining wall issues and all the other things that I brought up? I mean, everything needs to be resolved before he starts digging.
We're here to approve design compliance, compliance in the neighborhood, egress, property setbacks, and so on and so forth. Those things mentioned, while I completely appreciate it, and as any good builder or someone building a house would appreciate, are all building code things that will be given, will be submitted, will be when asked for from the building department. What you see on the drawings, just like any of my other projects in the neighborhood, which we've done quite a few now, when we're done, that's what you're going to have. We have a very high success rate of doing that. And we've never misled anybody in the past. You guys have the ability that if I'm not building it like I'm supposed to, which has happened, there's recourse. If I don't build it like I'm supposed to with the building department, there's recourse, right? This isn't willy-nilly. This is not, we're not just throwing this up there. There is a other process from your guys' approval, which is design and compliance, to building. And that building process is its own different beast, And Randy is welcome to go down, and she can come with me. I'll give her a call, and we can go down there together, whatever they want me to do.
You have one
Okay.
last item.
All right, Mr. Haas just said, if I don't build it like I say I'm going to, then you guys can come after me. Well, if we don't have a set of drawings that show what the building is supposed to be built like, and all I'm asking for is clarification of the things I talked about. Show the slope on the side.
Can I step in for just a moment? I think you have...
Make sure that the abutting
Property.
site changes, grade changes, and retaining walls are accommodated. Those kinds of things. Let us know first, because otherwise we got nothing to stop him from building it the way he wants to. And that is the truth.
I think that's an overstatement. I do agree we need a survey. We need the legal survey with dimensions, and we being staff and Adam, at a minimum, need to comb through the elevations and make sure the grade changes are accurately shown. I am comfortable doing both those things, receiving and evaluating the survey and reviewing the elevations. I'm comfortable with staff doing that.
I don't have a
to me,
problem.
those were those are the most major.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
concerns, right?
Well, you've got my list of questions there, Lisa.
Okay, well, then I would offer, Adam, can you wait another month? Can we have a meeting and go through these with staff, you, and
what if we
your
just did
neighbor?
remember on my project to 915 to 913, where we just had to where we put it as just a condition, right? Like, this is just a fence we're talking about here, so we put it as a condition.
Well, no, we're talking about the survey.
Well, the survey's been done. There's a pin survey.
And making sure the elevations are accurate.
A topo survey.
Topographic survey, yeah.
Well, and with the mortgage documents, of course, you get your plat. But, it would be, given the fact that winter's coming, it would be one of those situations where I feel like we would be delaying it unnecessarily, only because, first off, we're talking about a fence, but second of all, my grade, my elevation is all on the scope of my property, right? I mean, when we're required to submit this to you, that's what we submit. So if you're standing on my property, you have an 8-foot fence. That's not going to change, right? We could go over that, 6 ways to Sunday, but the fact remains on my property, the 8-foot fence. Now, it seems like everybody here has some sort of experience in the realm of construction. So you'll know that as elevation changes, when you dig down your footings, you change with the elevation. And on the property to the east, her property is not flat. That could change. But again, it would be illegal. It would be against building code for me to build on her property or against my survey, right? And, sorry, your name slipped my mind, but he strung a line across the entire property from pin to pin. So
Back to, okay, Randy, I have your list. There's 8 items. I believe we have fully answered 3 through 8 here, and the 2 that we cannot fully answer in this meeting are the accuracies of the site layout and how the slope of the site are represented. Do you agree or you disagree? Like, we've answered the height question. We've answered
What do you mean the height question?
whether or not it's actually a 4-story building.
Yeah,
We've answered
yeah.
that signed and sealed drawings are not required for design review. We've answered what type of paving is on the east side of the garage. We've answered what the coating on the masonry fence is. Proposed
Right.
drainage plan.
It is basically, you're right, it is basically, I would say 1 and 2, A, B, C, and D.
Yes, all
And
of
maybe
2.
3.
3, I believe it's been answered. If we want to debate whether or not it's correct, acceptable is another question, because there is a 0, there's no side yard requirement.
Right.
Now, one could still argue whether or not it's practical or feasible
Exactly.
or
Yeah,
comfortable
yeah.
or
but
attractive.
we are putting in all the French drains, so that should be a non-issue because we are taking care of drainage. So.
I have a quick question. So going back to something Mr. Dawes was just saying about the 8-foot fence on his property, you will have to build a retaining wall to start. So if the base of that 8-foot is going to have a retaining wall underneath it in some spots, correct?
No, what we would do is we would actually follow the grade of the land with our footing, because that's what, normally footings, that's what you'll do. You follow the grade with the footing. And the finished wall, right, on our property, on our side will be 8 feet, right? And if on Randy's property, let's say it goes up to 7 feet or dips down to 10 feet, we will finish that side as well. So it will be cosmetically appealing. It will be finished wall.
So it'll be an 8-foot wall on your side, and then do you know an unknown height on her side?
I can't, without obviously extending and reaching and going over to somebody else's property, and you know what I mean, shooting all those elevations and everything like that, I can't say for sure, right? But what I have said earlier is that I would be willing to, if the fence, when the fence gets improved, if there's some sort of, again, I have to stay in compliance. So if there's some sort of huge discrepancy, I have to bring it back to Michael and go, hey, this didn't end up how I thought. We need an administrative or a commission change, right?
After the fact.
We've run into that before. I mean, there's nothing that runs 100% perfectly to plan, and sometimes you have to adjust. But I'm very confident on my lot, and everything I'm proposing is exactly how I'm going to do it. Like, for instance, on the west side house, right? There's a 12-foot, 15-foot fence, or probably a 12-foot fence in the middle of the property, right? On his side of the fence, it might only show as a 10-foot fence, right? But because of the way the grade of the land goes, that fence goes all the way to the grass, right? So those things just get adjusted accordingly but I wouldn't go to him and go, oh, you said that you have an 8-foot fence, but look, it's 10 feet because it's 10 feet on my property, because that's not on his property.
There's 2 things that I'd like to address really briefly. The first is, I think that you've made some very valid points, Ms. Floyd, and I think that there's just some questions that the way that we're set up, they're kind of out there. My recommendation would be to get with Mike Miller or David Adcock. Those guys are the guys that you want to sit down, and they'll meet with you. You can call them up and say, I want to have a meeting. These guys cover the whole build process. A lot of the things that you brought up, unfortunately, are outside of our purview here, and that goes to the second point that I'd like to address, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we can only really speak to the survey to the extent that it has to do with the design. I would argue that he's addressed that because he says that he's going to flatten this whole lot out. So if he said, I'm going to build this house given this elevation and this slope, then maybe we'd have something to consider. But so long as it's going to be flat, I think that's the design standard that we would review.
Correct.
I'm concerned about tying down legally exactly where the front line of the building is.
Well, we're 12 feet from the property pin like we proposed. And that we have the property pins, right? So we're going to be 12 feet off that.
But is that shown in here? I mean,
It is. No, it's shown on the plan on page number 1. On the plat.
I think a counterpoint is that this grade change will drastically impact what this looks like from outside of the fence. Our job isn't to worry about how it looks from their yard, but rather how it looks from outside. And it is pretty dramatic to see, 13 feet crossing the side. So for that reason, I would think that there is valid justification to require that the drawings reflect that, rather than just a flat slope like what we've got.
This is a perfect example here to your point. That driveway is 28 feet, just over 28 feet. That garage is 24 feet deep, right? That's a 140-foot lot, right? You're going into you're going 50 feet into the lot. The grade is not a 12-foot grade, right? It's not a 12-foot grade because of the way we're cutting in.
But the problem is we don't really know what the grade is and how it relates to the neighboring property. I mean, the picture that we see here shows almost a cutout of the block without any reference to how it relates to the neighboring property. That's what I would like to see, is what in reality that grade change is going to be, because you're going to be changing the grade of your land, of your lot.
Correct.
And what I would like to be able to see how that looks from the outside, to Jorge's point, and how it impacts the neighboring property.
I think from a very simple standpoint, this perspective here that you've got tells a lot to us about what you're planning on doing.
Sure.
And about what we cannot yet see. So if I go to the far north edge of your property, where I am 12 feet up in the air, and then I come on the east side, and then I go to the far south edge of the property where it is down 12 feet, and I draw a straight line. Essentially, that could potentially be the grade on the adjacent property, which means there will be a retaining wall next to the lower area, because it could potentially be holding up earth, because that is on the edge. There could be a retaining wall there. Additionally, the wall that you're showing as 8 feet tall, that is at that point, yes, at the highest point, the footing for that would be following existing grade. So what you're saying is you're going to follow existing grade with your footing. Your footing is not able to be represented on this drawing at all because existing grade is not shown. But you will follow existing grade because you're not allowed to adjust the adjacent property owner's grade with your construction. So if you follow existing grade with your footing, it can't be shown on this document, which means we just don't know how it will work out. It doesn't seem complicated to resolve it, but I do think that it's very, very important to see that in advance of approving the wall that abuts an adjacent property.
So let me ask you a question, just because, so we keep bringing up the 12-foot number, which I don't disagree with you. The 12 feet is not even, the 12-foot drop is not even shown in the picture. The reason why it's not shown in the picture is because it would be the furthest north part and the furthest south point of the lot, which is 28 feet from the corner of that garage, right? So if it grades like, let's say it graded perfectly straight, like a perfectly string-line grade, at the midpoint of that, at the grossest estimation, you might only be 6 feet, right? Correct. But then go another 22 feet, 24 feet back for the garage. Now it might only be, give or take 4 feet. Now, the house next door to the east grades and has a secondary building at the alley level, right? So it actually grades all the way through. So we actually did anticipate this because I've had this lot for a long time, right? So it actually grades, and we don't have to do any massive grade manipulation on their property, right?
How about
so
this?
We're not changing. So I guess my point would be is that it ends up being, I get your guys' stance, but it ends up being kind of a quasi-9 issue because I'm not actually doing any work on her property, nor am I going to, if there's a retaining wall I have to add, it would be in here, which there is one because it's right there and it's proposed, right?
With respect to the southernmost point on the east boundary line
Correct.
of your 8-foot tall fence that is shown there, can you put the cursor on?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, yeah. The southernmost
There.
boundary of the 8-foot tall fence.
Yep.
How high is it above the existing adjacent property owner's grade?
If at that exact point, my estimation, and we walked it, right? That's where you put your pin, give or take. It was approximately 5 feet.
Okay, so you have an 8-foot tall, the 8-foot tall wall is 8 foot above the highest grade. The grade is sloping from north to south, so that location, it's past the midpoint. So existing grade is going to be dropping below the original level, so that 8-foot wall would be taller than 8 feet. The amount of...
On my property, the 8-foot wall will be 8 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
How high is it above the adjacent property?
So approximately 5 to 6 feet. Right, but that's on their property because they decided when they built their house, that just slopes all the way down. So if you go to the plat, if you go to page 1 again, maybe we can see it a little clearer on there. One more, sorry. There, oh, there. This is a good example on this because what it shows, if you look at their secondary house, their rental apartment, right here on the bottom, which is on the alley itself, right? That's on the alley. So their grade is already all the way down. It goes all the way down there, and that's at grade, right? Then if you look at the first rectangle/square that I have drawn coming off the alley where the 28-foot right there, that's the garage, right? And so if you look at where the corner of her house is, that's just the natural grade of the lawn, of the lot. But you can see on her lot, it's not a perfect slope. It actually is higher there and then goes into a steep hill. So it drops off.
We actually have retaining walls around the garages on the northeast and west.
All right, but we're having all this verbally explained and described to us. The fact that we're doing estimated retaining wall heights and guesses about this and that and verbal descriptions, to my mind, says that we don't have all the materials that we'd like to see to be able to show what's really going to change on this property.
Well, you have everything that's showing what's going to change on that property. You just don't have everything that's going to show what changes on the next property, which
No. You're changing your property, which impacts her property.
Correct, but I have all that listed, right?
Right.
All that.
But you're not showing me anything that's explaining how it's impacting her property.
Correct. That's exactly what I just said. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying that I would like to see.
So would Randy be okay with paying for a survey for her property and maybe a elevation?
Her property's not changing. Her property stays the same. It's your property that's changing.
Correct, but I'm making sure that when I do this by law, I'm making sure I don't affect her property, right? Like, I'm not touching her property. I'm not doing anything to her property whatsoever. I'm staying 100% on mine, and by law and by building code standards, I have to make sure that I don't cause her property to fall in. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm doing all my due diligence. I just need clarification, because what you're asking me is to now plat out another property, give elevations on her property to show.
You don't need to show any elevations on her property. You only have to show the elevation of grade on your property line.
Which I've done.
If you have the elevations at grade on your property line.
Where is that?
That is not reflected in the documents that we see. We only see flat lines on our documents, and that's the reason why we do not have the ability to comment on how the existing grade is being affected. That's the only question.
So you want like a before and after kind of thing? I just want to make sure I'm clear, because,
Is there, so the after will be different
oh, of course.
than what we're
Building
seeing?
Yeah.
That's what we need to see.
Well,
What
you
will-
see the after. You just don't see the before.
We don't see how the after will be affected by the adjacent grade. So,
I'm trying to.
in the
yeah.
event, so we're going around and around on this, really? I
Yeah, I'm
think
just
that
trying to-
we're at a
And
point-
we can show, staff can show you some examples.
Yes.
Okay.
And this has come before this board before, specifically with respect to grades, both on adjacent properties and on adjacent streets.
Sure.
So,
So could we separate the fence then?
Well, could we make a motion that establishes a maximum if Ms. Floyd is willing to tell us what that maximum height would be for her to be comfortable? And so long as he stays under that, we can provide a motion that is not going to hold them up?
you can make a motion. But the only thing that I would say is we are not seeing how this actually, the way that the grade is shown is not, I realize we're hearing it is correct, it will be this way, it's not.
No, I understand that. My concern is, she's the one that's got to live next door to it. So if she says, I can stomach 6 foot, I can't stomach 10 foot, then I feel like I've done my job as a commissioner to say, okay, well, let's set this at a height that's going to be acceptable for her. So do you have an idea as far as what the maximum?
No, I appreciate you asking, and the lower the better, of course. My concern is before he starts building, I want to see a simple set of drawings that reflect the true conditions that he's aiming for, so that he can be held accountable. He can be held to those standards. Otherwise, what?
And
We're
you
just
get all
going to
that-
go back and listen to the
Will your-
recordings of this meeting?
Will your
We do it
engineer-
all the time.
Well, I don't want to do that.
Will your engineered drawings represent the actual grades on site?
The engineered drawings will give, like all building standards, they give minimum and maximum heights for footing drawings or basic conditions and standards, right? So if, let's say you wanted to be, like, let's say you get an engineered drawing for,
We understand that. What I'm trying to do is meet in the middle. We would like to see,
Well, I think she wants to see the
adjacent property owner
full-
would like to see how the adjacent grade abuts the property line. I believe that if you have a signed and sealed set of engineering documents for the foundation walls around the property, it could reflect how they affect the adjacent
yeah,
property.
it'll give your variances. I don't, I think that we got fixated on the height, right? But to be honest with you, I don't actually think it's about the height. I think, she's concerned about just seeing all the building plans and all the building drawings, all that. Like that Randy had just said, she said she wants to see all the specs, all the building drawings, the
That's
engineered
not,
plans,
I
all
did
that.
not say that.
Are you just talking about the retaining wall? Or are you talking about the whole house? Sorry. Is she,
Ms. Floyd, do you have, if he had a set of plans here today, what would be that maximum height on that wall that you'd be able to live with?
I'm not, you're going into this trap.
It's not because the thing is, I understand you want to see the plans, but he can't even go back and draw up any plans if he doesn't know what's going to be acceptable for you.
What's acceptable for the city? What's
Well,
the
let him
maximum
start out,
besides
let him
that?
start out with the 6-foot-tall wall at the north end, I would say, and that should give them some privacy, and then we'll see what it turns out to be at the southern end. But that does not negate my need to see that he can draw a set of drawings that really reflect what's going to happen to my property and what's going to happen to Lee's property. How is Lee's stepped retaining wall going to be protected?
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. We have the ability today to establish a maximum height that he can't go over. When you're talking about the plans, though, that's not something we can't control. We can't make him share building plans with you. He simply has to...
No, I'm not talking about building plans, sir. I'm simply saying I would be okay with the drawings he submitted today if they were correct. But
Yes,
they're not correct.
I support what Randy's saying. I think the level of detail shown is fine if it were more accurate?
It is accurate, it's just not accurate for her
Yeah,
property.
I
and
would
her
disagree.
house.
I believe that it's accurate as much as it can be. We can add additional language to those plans, but what her issue is, or what she stated her issue is what this looks like from her side and what it looks like from other property owners. And to Commissioner Charneco's point, I agree, yes. So when we're talking about design, how does this look from another property? So the only way that I can see that impacting us is what that height would be on that. And so it doesn't make sense, it's not efficient for us to go back and redraw plans or have an applicant redraw plans just to find out what that height is. The rest of it, I'm quite
Sir,
confident
okay,
it doesn't fall in.
He's not, okay, look at back where the garage is. He's not showing any kind of accommodation for the stepped retaining wall that's about 12 feet tall. He's not showing any accommodation for that on that property owner's.
When you say accommodation, what specifically are you referring to?
Well, if he pulls all the dirt away from that, the wall is just going to fall down.
That's getting into
Well, that's what I'm worried about. That's a
Road.
specification issue. That has to do.
No, it's not a specification.
That's a liability.
It has to do with technical
It
details.
has to be shown on the drawing.
It does not have to be shown on any drawing. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because I can't say what I'm going to do because...
Hang tight. We've gone back and forth on this.
Yeah,
I think that we need to have a motion on this, and we can have a motion, we can have discussion on what it is. We have had a lot of discussion about what is expected. I think it is down to the issue of the level of detail that's shown in the documents and what needs to be provided for us to give approval.
Sure, I would just like clarification on that before anything. Like on her, so basically, level of detail on Randy's property.
No.
It's my property, mine's done.
Level of detail from this commission in a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move that we approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the downtown design district zoning ordinance as referred in section C and D of the staff report. I'd like to make that with the condition that this wall on his final plans don't exceed a maximum height of 6 feet on the adjacent property owner's side.
I have a motion.
Can I have a comment on that?
Yeah.
The 6 foot, it's at grade, from grade level. There's already a sketch that I think Randy's drawn this, pretty much what it would look like.
Correct.
Graphically.
Yep.
I mean, you had drawn it, and it probably is close to accurate. Do you have an issue with what you drew?
Sorry, sir?
In this sketch right here, you pretty much drew what you want him to show, right?
I don't have that, by the way.
I'm just wondering.
I think that that's a very valuable document, because what it is showing is if this wall is built the way that he is proposing, it would be 14 to 16 feet tall. And if this motion was to go forward, you building a maximum 6 foot tall wall with respect to the adjacent property owner, you might not be up to the grade that you're trying to achieve.
I'd have to appeal that.
You would be, and that's the reason, that document right there is the reason why.
But this is again, sorry, go ahead.
That's the reason why the adjacent grade needs to be reflected.
But this is an orthographical view from a different property. It's essentially what she's showing. It's not showing my property.
It's showing your property as it currently sits.
We have a motion on the...
This would be your elevation. Your elevation, you would have to show
We
the slope
have
on that side.
a motion. We either need a second, or we need to let it die, and we need a second motion. For lack of a second motion, the first motion is is no longer valid.
So, can I propose something?
Hang tight.
Sure.
Can I get a second motion?
I mean, I'm going to make a motion off of this sketch that's been drawn because I do think it is appropriate and fitting. So I make a motion to approve the application on the basis that this project meets the regulations and guidelines, the downtown design district zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D on the staff report, with the condition that the wall will not exceed the dimension of 16 feet tall, including the retaining wall.
May I ask a question?
Need
Of
a session.
staff. What is maximum height, allowable height for a fence for a side yard? Sorry.
8.
So how can we have...
That's measured from the, that's the freestanding portion above grade. So if it's 16 feet, and this is the adjacent property line, that 8 feet is measured from the part that's freestanding above.
Okay, so the retaining wall part does not count.
Right.
I have a motion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call vote?
Anthony Black,
No.
Jorge Charnico,
No.
Matt Guillory,
No.
Tyler Holmes,
Nay? What? Yes.
Sarah Miller,
Yes.
Marcus Uday,
Aye.
James Varnum.
Aye.
We have 3 to 4. Sorry.
Got a passed motion.
4 yeses, 3 noes.
Okay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item B. This is UDC 19-00028 at 64 Northwest 7th Street. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Would the staff want to present this?
This item is a proposal for another single-family residence. The difference in this case, it's also in in Cottage District. It's on the south side of 7th Street between North Dewey Avenue and North Lee. Distinction of this application as compared to the last one is this also has a detached garage at the alley with a secondary dwelling unit on the upper floor of that structure. We've highlighted a couple issues for you in the staff report similar to the one that was addressed in the last report with respect to materials. In this case, the use of lap siding and the use of cedar wood screen for the patio on the 3rd floor. Staff has reviewed the specs and warranties on those materials and find them to be compatible with other materials that are allowed per the design guidelines that apply in Cottage District, and therefore recommending approval of that. There's also a third section in this report that talks about development pattern and community character. This is the same discussion we had on this exact same lot back in March of 2018 when another 3-story house was proposed and approved on this lot under UDCA 18-0001. That approval is still in effect and will remain in effect until March of 2020. But during that discussion, we talked about the fact that there's a need to try and, I guess, address differences of height from one property to the other. In this discussion, the distinction is that the house next door is a single-story structure which requires a variance in the Cottage District because there's a minimum building height of 2 stories. So when this was discussed in conjunction with the previous approval, the Commission came to the conclusion that a 3-story house on this lot next to a 1-story house, which is next to, again, another 3-story house on the east of that single-story house, is acceptable and in keeping with the community character as it exists today. So therefore, as in conclusion, the staff has recommended approval of this project to the Commission, and that completes our presentation and prepared to respond to any questions the Commission may have.
Does the Commission have any questions for staff? Would the applicant like to speak?
Asa Highsmith, 430 Northwest 12th, Apartment 103, representing the applicant. You guys have had, hopefully, time to review the documents, and I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Would anybody from the audience like to speak to this case? In the absence of any questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report.
I have a motion.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is other business. And with that, I am going to recuse myself.
So we're going to be reviewing, well, we have the chairperson that's recused himself previously. Is he recused from this one?
Yeah, he's not returning.
So under other business, we have PUD 01740 at 3748 North Lincoln Boulevard. Michael, could you give us an overview?
I'll give the overview. So you may remember about a year ago, a little over a year ago, a section of Lincoln Boulevard was rezoned into the Urban Design District, and it has its own design regulations and guidelines embedded in a subsection of the UDC ordinance. This property is seeking to rezone to planned unit development. Can you go to the site plan? I think it might be in the... So this development would provide for a grocery store, one of the new senior wellness centers, and an office building on the same site. And the applicant has described, and they will describe again, why certain programmatic and functional requirements from their point of view drove the site organization. The site organization as proposed doesn't meet all of the key regulations and guidelines of the overlay. Specifically, that buildings are supposed to be fronting Lincoln Boulevard, and they're supposed to be a minimum 2 stories in height. So I have detailed the differences in our staff report, and I've made under the staff recommendation, I've incorporated a list of things that I think would bring it further into compliance, but I'm going to let the applicant present it at this point before we talk any further.
Yeah, once again, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, on behalf of the applicant. So first, I think we need to kind of focus on what this presents. What this presents is a wonderful opportunity for Northeast Oklahoma City. It's a twofold opportunity. It's a new grocery store, as well as the next senior wellness center. And so if you think about the nature of those uses, they simply don't lend themselves to the guidelines as crafted in the Lincoln Boulevard overlay. Primarily, when you think about a grocery store use, it is not typical where you would have a grocery store fronting on Lincoln. Grocery stores are going to want to have the parking lot in front and be set back. The other problem is that the way that the guidelines are drafted is it requires 2 occupiable floors. It's not common to have a grocery store that has multiple floors. When you think of the Senior Wellness Center, it does appear to be in a position where it could front on Lincoln, but it won't be a 2-story structure. I'm not sure of any of the senior wellness centers that have been constructed are constructed to be 2 stories. It will be a single-story building. And so we understand and appreciate the overlay. It's simply that the uses proposed here don't comply and can't comply with what was contemplated. I think at a more fundamental level, if you think about the overlay, Lincoln Boulevard doesn't really lend itself to that. Lincoln operates as a state highway, essentially. It is a massive, divided, I think it's either 6 or 8 lanes, and it operates like a highway. So the idea that this stretch, especially with these uses, would be an urban, walkable part of Lincoln, I just don't think is reality. So staff does recommend approval. There are a handful of conditions that I'd like to visit about. Condition A, we cannot agree to. We can't break it into 2 tracks. 2 tracks with the track fronting Lincoln to allow for the future development. Either A assumes that the grocery store has failed, or secondly, would assume that you would be building something in front of the grocery store, and you would thereby limit the visibility of the grocery store and create problems for that particular user. So we can't agree to break it into 2 tracks. We do agree to B. We do agree to remove any pylon signs. We have revised the PUD document to allow for monument signs, and so we do agree with that. We do agree with C, and in fact, what you see here actually incorporates those. We show the protected pedestrian ways throughout the exhibit that has been resubmitted to Development Services and Planning through the PUD, and we don't agree to D or E. So again, we have what I believe to be a wonderful opportunity for this part of the city to bring a new grocery store, as well as the corporate headquarters building and the senior wellness center, which is a part of a MAPS project. And we simply are in a position where the overlay that was approved doesn't comply with the type of uses that are contemplated on this site. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you would have, and would ask for your approval.
Any questions from commissioners? Any questions from individuals in the audience? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, so the commission is being asked to make a recommendation to Planning Commission. It's not approving the project. One thing, I don't know if either David or I pointed out, so if this is approved, the commission, it would not be in design review anymore. The commission would not see the future development. One reason that I thought that the condition A was important was if the site is a terrific success and somebody wants to build a pad site out on the corner, it would need to be 2 stories. But, I mean, zoning is forever until it's changed. So I thought it was important for us to look beyond just these 3 buildings.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that this is, it's really a down zone. I know zoning cases don't come before this body that often, but it's zoned straight C3, and then the overlay came in. So what we're doing through the PUD is really down zoning and taking away a bunch of other uses that are otherwise available on the site. So I do think it is an overall net positive for this particular piece of property.
I have a question. I don't know if it's necessarily for the applicant or for staff. Why does this need to be a PUD instead of a variance?
So because of the overlay, it would be about 12 variances. And if we went to the Board of Adjustment with 12 variances, they would tell us, go rezone it.
Okay, but why does it have to be a PUD instead of a series of variances?
It just doesn't, functionally, it just wouldn't work that way. We'd be varying literally the entirety of the overlay. The PUD, the ordinance that allows PUDs is set up in a way to allow a more streamlined approach to zoning on the site.
Right, I'll agree. Everything that they don't meet could be varied. What I observe when cases go to Board of Adjustment and they have more than 3 variances, that's a sign that a more overall coordination of the design needs to be done. And typically that's done through the PUD. But
recently, if you had more than 1, they almost won't accept it, and you are almost forced to go and file a rezoning application of some sort.
Another question, the Wellness Center, is there the frontage on Lincoln what's the interaction between that building and Lincoln? Is it just a blank wall, or are there windows?
At this point, we don't know. It's really early on in the process, so we just don't know at this point.
That's one reason I felt it was important to include the facade transparency guideline. I understand that the center isn't fully designed. I understand they don't completely know where all the programmatic elements are within it, but I have to believe it could be designed quite transparently and interactively with the street frontage. I mean, that's one of the key purposes of all the design guidelines, is to promote that interaction with the sidewalk.
Are there any other questions or comments?
So with the considering this PUD, are we just relinquishing any design consideration if we, or is that part of what we're recommending?
Yeah, the PUD would remove this property from design review.
So do we consider the design of this as?
Well, so the PUD can embed any design guidelines that it would want, and Mr. Box has said it's made provisions for signs that are closer to what the overlay asks for. It included things about the internal parking lot, access ways, sidewalks, landscaping at the parking lot. All the text of that's in the PUD matches the urban design overlay. But it won't be reviewed by staff or the commission. It'll be completely out of the process.
And the new overlays, I mean, intended as, if I recall correctly, I mean, to sort of revise or over time to create a new dynamic on this street frontage, correct?
Yeah, that was the whole intent, was to create a more urban environment with buildings in a more consistent setback, with parking behind the structure.
Sure.
And with beefier parking lot landscaping, with more facade transparency, and with high-quality, durable building materials.
So while historically, like most grocery stores and wellness centers and office buildings are one story, I think this overlay would encourage us to require 2 stories and all that.
Yes, one of the cases on the consent docket was a new office building for the Home Builders Association, and it's shown at 2 stories.
Okay.
And it's just up the street from this side.
If you think about a wellness center, I mean, these are senior wellness centers. And so the idea of a second floor is just incompatible with that. You're adding significant costs for space that really serves no purpose. I mean, the wellness centers in Oklahoma City have been wildly successful. None of them are 2 stories.
How tall is the structure?
It's not known at this time.
I mean, personally, I'd like to see a design that attempts to, I mean, those 3 buildings can fit along the street frontage and could be, if not 2 stories, at least the height of 2 stories to meet the intentions of the overlay.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, kind of in sync with that. It seems like this is 3 separate site plans by 3 separate, I don't know, it just seems like they're very disconnected the way they're all 3 designed. And I think the site plan could be revised to reflect something more urban, at least to, the wellness center looks like it is attempting to like front Lincoln and at least provide some type of planning behind it. The grocery store, it looks like it's a pad site. Same with the office building, just concrete blocks, throw it down, maximize parking. And I just think that kind of is inconsistent with what this Lincoln overlay was intended to do. So, I don't know.
No, in parking, we do in the PUD provide for a 20% reduction in parking. So we're not maximizing the parking. We will be minimizing compared to what the code would require for the use. But the ability to have it set back with the parking in front is critical to the ability of this grocery store to operate.
Why couldn't the grocery store have the parking behind, move the grocery store up to Lincoln and have the parking a little bit more removed from Lincoln?
Well, I think it's just reality of how consumers interact with grocery stores. There is, other than the one example, the staff mentioned the one example of the Uptown Grocery and then some examples in like Brooklyn. So certainly there's one on May Avenue, but even the Whole Foods, which I would submit as a wonderful example of a new grocery store, very well done, parking lot looks nice, it is set back. It faces Grand, and it is set back with the parking in front. It is just not common to have grocery stores where the parking isn't back. The front door needs to be behind the parking.
I constantly have said that it would be so cool for that area where the Whole Foods is if it did front the street. It would change that area dramatically, and it would have probably changed the way development patterns in the area existed. My opinion here is Lincoln Boulevard, it's a little bit new. This is probably our biggest one we've reviewed to date. I think this is what it's about, and I think I'm completely fine with pushing y'all to put the grocery store on Lincoln and trying to change the standard in the area. I think it could change, and I think that's what this is all about, truthfully. So
we're not willing to do that, but I understand.
I also think that the Lincoln overlay shouldn't allow you to go against it, because that's why this was put in place. So, I've said this before, but sometimes maybe this project isn't right off Lincoln. It's an overlay. This was already known before this process probably began. So maybe we can just say no. This is my opinion. So
what you're providing is a recommendation.
Yeah, but we can.
To Commissioner Holmes's point, this is a 4-square block. Like you said, this is a big tract of land here, and it seems to be going away from the direction that we just agreed that we're trying to go with Lincoln. So it seems kind of counterproductive to me.
So I think I want to touch on something you said about intent. I think the intent of the overlay is to make this strip, Lincoln Boulevard, more attractive for the community. And from my vantage point, if it wasn't for the fact that it was a grocery store that is desperately needed in that area and a community center, I would probably be against it. But I tend to look at it holistically, and what would the individuals along Lincoln Boulevard benefit the most from? Is some aesthetic attributes make it better or worse? I don't know that it really matters if they have a grocery store, if they have a wellness center. So I appreciate what you're saying. Mm-hmm. I just tend to kind of take a step back and think of what is the intent. The intent is to make it more attractive to the community, and I think the community that it serves.
I think that's a good point. Is there a grocery store? Is there an operator for this grocery store, or is this just kind of a wish list?
I believe it's Homeland,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
And
it is Homeland.
That kind of goes to what Commissioner Charneco was saying, is there's a lot of backstory to this. If this was in another neighborhood, probably anywhere else in Oklahoma City, I'd be inclined to say, go back to the drawing board. But there was a lot of work that was done to get to this point. I don't know. We could get creative with parking and things like that. I don't know. This is just my opinion. I don't know that we want to take risk with known consumer behaviors as it pertains to where you put a grocery store in proximity to the parking. But I definitely don't want to inhibit them in any way. I don't want to handicap that grocery store's ability to be successful, knowing that the lack of full-service grocery stores in that area has significantly impacted the lives of the people that live there.
Could the office building move to the south, move the grocery store a little bit more to the west, and then open up that other portion for more parking? I think integrating the buildings somehow more together it just seems like I feel like the site could be designed in a way where maybe the buildings could talk to each other more versus just talk to a parking lot.
Sure, we can look at it. I mean, it's not, like I said, at this point, this is a concept plan, but we're happy to look at it. I'm not going to make any commitments. But.
So you're carte blanche throwing out the design regulations. Is there some compromise here? I understand that there's height issues, but it would be a shame if this looked like the homeland on 23rd on Classen, just a generic box. So is there some compromise where we may not get a two-story building, but there's some assurances that the community's getting a grocery store that doesn't necessarily look like every other homeland in the community?
Sure, no, fair question. At this point, no. I mean, we're not far enough along in that process. We're happy to come back and apprise everyone of what we're doing, but we're not willing to subject ourselves to design review.
Are there any additional comments or
I
questions?
think there is a citizen that I can hear.
If you could state your name and address, please.
Certainly. Good afternoon. Zenithan Warrior Jr. Address is 5712 North Lottie Avenue. I've heard we're talking about this particular design, this urban design overlay district. When this was first proposed, I believe back in 2017, I did sit on several of the design meetings there at State Capitol as this overlay was designed, the particular area for that. So I am well aware of the design, its purpose to improve the overall corridor of Lincoln Boulevard, because it is very important with the gateway to the Capitol as it comes in from the north, therefore this. But looking at this particular location, we are very excited about this location. The people I've worked with concerning the location for the Health and Wellness Center at this particular campus located through that particular area. And this whole particular tract of land, 9 to 10 acres, is going to be actually what I would consider to be a healthy campus. It's going to have a pharmacy, healthy fruits and vegetables, and also a senior health and wellness center, which is missing desperately within the Northeast Quadrant area. We do not have a full-service grocery store at all in the entire quadrant to have for that. So saying that, since Homeland has agreed to, is interested in designing a particular property here, this location, someone had mentioned about what is this Homeland going to look like? It's going to look like the one on 18th Street. It's going to look like the one that's over there on May Avenue and Britton Road. I can't answer that, but I can tell you is that this is the first Homeland that I've talked with the directors of Homeland. This is the first store they've built from the ground up in this region for this. So this is not going to necessarily look like a Homeland that you may be familiar with. They're located throughout Oklahoma City area because most of those were acquired and the property was already designed when they moved in here. So they are going to be designing this from the ground up as they would accommodate it to make it look well for the particular area. Now, that being said, I am excited, as I said before, about this location for this particular grocery store, this particular corner. And I think the best location for the store for it to be successful is on that hard corner there that butts to 36th Street and North Lincoln Boulevard. I don't know how much you all have been up and down Lincoln Boulevard between 4 and 6 o'clock, but really between 4 and 5 o'clock. That is a 6-lane boulevard that is separated by a median. There is tons of traffic starting around about 4 o'clock up to 5 o'clock, and most of that traffic is going to the north, going right there past that Homeland that is on the east side of 36th Street. And when you go to a grocery store, a lot of times you want to go in and go out and go through that. So it would be very advantageous for the parking lot to be butt right up there next to North Boulevard for easy access and to get into the grocery store and then go back out again, that you were able to go in and out of the particular area for that. So I think that that would be an excellent location for it to be in that particular site location for that particular area. For that. So far as this location for the Health and Wellness Center, There have so far been 2 health and wellness centers been built with Match 3 funding. The one that is now being proposed for this 3rd health wellness center in the Northeast Quadrant, there have been over 20-some sites that have been discussed as possible sites in the Northeast Quadrant for this health and wellness center. This was received by many citizens throughout the area as being the best possible location for the health and wellness center at that particular location for that. So I am, as a citizen, very supportive of this particular campus being used by a particular purpose, and I think that if it would be put in this particular PUD, it would be very advantageous, would be very successful, operational for the entire campus, of it being a pharmacy, healthy fruits and vegetables, and also an area for the can be used for the senior health and wellness center in that particular location.
Are there any other questions or comments? Is there anybody else that would like to speak on behalf of this project or against the project? Okay, do we have a motion for, I guess we have to put forward a motion for recommendation. So typically the chair does not put forward a motion, so I'm trying to refrain. So
yeah, I think you need to make a recommendation one way or the other. If you do nothing, I guess they'll just go forward with no recommendation.
So if we don't have a motion, this will just move forward without really comment from us.
I'll do a motion. I'm just trying to, half of the staff recommendations have been kind of vetoed, I guess, but before that, I'd like to just make a comment. One of the things that the gentleman from the community said, one of the words that he used was campus, and you know, I'm totally in favor of all of this going in at this location. I'd hate to see us completely throw out design guidelines in order to do it, but any approach that can be taken to make this as cohesive of a campus as possible, I think would be a good approach. So the 2 tracks is a non-starter?
Yes, sir. Yes, so on the conditions, we said no to A, D, and E, and we agreed to B and C.
I mean, I personally think our recommendation should include that it meets the guidelines, all the guidelines of the overlay. Right, personally.
And I forgot, what's the issue with E, the fence guidelines?
Well, so the way it's written, obviously it assumes 2 tracks. We will have screening along Lindsay to screen all the service corridors, but we don't know exactly at this moment what all of the screening might look like. So in an effort to avoid getting caught up later, we're just simply not willing to agree to it.
I mean, in this recommendation, the planning department will do what they want with it, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's still oversight, it's just not our oversight.
The oversight, the PUD document will govern what types of materials, the heights, the uses, and it'll be evaluated at the permit desk.
But yeah, planning and city.
Yeah, plan review will review what comes in against the
Yeah.
PUD.
And PUD will be approved by planning and then city council.
Correct.
I personally like the notion of recommending it because I think while it's being negotiated with us right now, I think it opens it up for further negotiation, but also holds somewhat of a stricter boundary now, because I think it could push a little further if we don't make a full recommendation now, and I think it's not consistent with like the Lincoln overlay, what we want to. So I don't know.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I'm torn. I sat in on a lot of the community meetings that you referenced earlier. I think I attended all but one of those. I think if the community knew that we could potentially block their supermarket, their grocery store, they would have objected to it. So I just kind of go back to the fact that there is a great need in this community for a grocery store, and that kind of trumps my architectural instinct.
Can I give a shot at a motion? Make a motion to recommend approval to the Planning Commission for the requested rezone from C3, O2, R1, and Urban Design Overlay District, Lincoln Boulevard Corridor Subdistrict, to PUD 1740 with the conditions that the applicant revises the PUD language to eliminate the allowance for any pylon signs. The applicant revises the PUD exhibit to show the required protected internal pedestrian access ways and to indicate paths of travel between all building entrances on the entire site. That the applicant revises the PUD language to adhere as closely as possible to the fence regulations and guidelines contained in the Lincoln Boulevard Overlay District, and that the applicant revises the PUD language to include some guidelines for interaction with Lincoln Boulevard.
So I'm not willing to accept the last two.
Yeah, okay, that's right.
Well, you don't have to accept it, but I mean, that can be the recommendation.
And that's fine. My only question is, our
It's
PUD is
broad.
drafted the way it's drafted. It's going to the Planning Commission tomorrow. How does it look logistically to Planning Commission tomorrow with the record that would be like this? Would we need to incorporate additional technical evaluations into the PUD document?
No, I think that would just go into the recommendation,
Okay.
the staff report. This is what they're recommending, and then the planning commission could either accept that or
Yeah,
or do their
incorporate
own.
them or not.
Because those are different than,
No, I understand.
okay.
I was not clear on the last one. It was a little vague.
Well, I was just say it's requirement D, but without the hard 60% number. I would hate to see just a 20-foot tall sheer cinder block wall along Lincoln.
Yeah, I heard to include, provide some interaction with the street, I think is where you were going.
Right.
Specific yet vague.
Yeah.
Well, if it's vague, if it's that vague, I mean, what keeps the applicant from proceeding as they would otherwise and just saying, I complied, because we're using language that doesn't stipulate any type of metric that can be measured?
Well, our language is just a recommendation. The planning is going to have to set some sort of metric, right?
So PUDs typically just deal with height, percentage of building materials, setbacks, parking ratios, things of that nature.
What are the implications if we do not recommend it?
If you don't make a recommendation at all, or if you don't,
Well, if we can't come to a motion,
there's really not, I mean, it's just, that'll just go forward. your comments will go forward to the planning commission tomorrow.
Right, we'll report the UDC did not make a recommendation. If you do not make a recommendation. If you do make any sort of recommendation, we'll report that, and then it's up to planning commission how they
So is no recommendation seen as a neutral, or is it seen as a negative?
It's all perspective.
I can't say. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think they'll work out the details as it goes through the next phases, but I think our recommendation being based on our guidelines seems reasonable to me.
I'm in favor of the project. I just hate to see all design guidelines stripped out. I mean, I think what we're asking for here, some interaction with Lincoln Boulevard and some compliance with fence regulations does not seem like a bar that's insurmountable.
Well, I mean, you could, include D&E in your recommendation, and if they don't agree to it down the line with Planning Commission, then they don't agree to it. But at least you're on record that those things were important to you, if, in fact, you're saying they're important to you.
I just think it's been such a challenge to get a grocery store in this part of town. If there was another one somewhere else, I would be on the complete other side of the coin. But I know it's been a real challenge to get a grocery store, and I just can't get past that myself.
I feel the same way. I think that if there's any concession to be made, I mean, we have the applicants here. We can try to see what makes sense for them, but sending it with conditions that they've articulated are non-starters that absolutely won't work, I'd liken that to us crippling it, for lack of a better term, before going before Planning Commission.
So, Marcus, do you have a motion to put?
Well,
okay,
I didn't get a second, so.
Okay, sorry. Is there a second on Matt's motion? Okay, so, Marcus, is there a motion you'd like to put forward?
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval to the Planning Commission for the request to rezone from C3 02 R1 and Urban Design Overlay District Lincoln Boulevard Corridor Subdistrict to PUD 1740 with the condition that we would accept condition B and condition C.
Is there a second? I will second that motion. Could we go ahead and get a roll call on this one, please?
Jorge Charnico,
Yes.
Matt Guillory,
Yes.
Tyler Holmes,
Yes.
Sarah Miller,
Yes.
Marcus Uday,
Aye.
James Barnum.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Motion moves forward. Is Anthony coming back? Do we know? Okay. Okay, so next we have communications, and we've got a couple of items for administrative approval. Lisa, is that?
Yeah, a sign and a cell tower. You don't need action on those. That's just a report.
Okay. Any comments from planning department?
See, did Michael already, did he step out? We note our November meeting is earlier than usual because of the holiday. So please, because we do have cases, so please double check your calendars that you'll be here on the 20th.
Any comments from commission members? All right, the next regular commission meeting is Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. New applications were submitted to staff by 4 p.m. Tuesday, October 22nd, 2019. Revisions and information on continued projects are to be submitted by October 29, 2019. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.